Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guests today, Larry Woods, Democratic analyst, and Steve Gill, Republican analyst. We're talking about the issues going on in Washington right now. We're talking about the Supreme Court before we left on this break. Larry, to also continue on the Supreme Court, there continues to be criticism about what's called the shadow docket in the Supreme Court. Even the Chief Justice, John Roberts, has become concerned about this because it appears cases are coming in. They're not really being vetted. They're not getting arguments before the court. They're not even getting real briefs put in. But the court's making a decision. Is it time to get rid of the shadow docket?
Yes. This is not a liberal conservative issue. I don't like what the conservative majority is doing with the shadow docket. When my liberals were on the majority in the court 35 years ago, they didn't do it as much, but that's just because they hadn't gotten used to it. They shouldn't have done it either. The shadow docket means you don't get a full briefing from the lawyers. You don't even know what the vote on the Supreme Court is 90% of the time. And there's just no excuse for using the shadow docket to make major decisions. The shadow docket was intended to handle, last-minute motion for stays or stop everything for a month or two until the court can hear it. We're really going down the wrong road.
Steve, is that what you think too?
I agree. Again, I think you ought to follow the procedure. You have a trial, you have an appeal, you have an appeal where cert is taken with the Supreme Court, and that's the process you will follow. Again, if you've got a special circumstance, a death penalty case that's coming to fore, that's where you can rush to the Supreme Court with limited briefs, and like Larry said, delay it for a little while, but you shouldn't be having final rulings.
Another matter that may well be in the courts for that too much longer, and I'll direct this question to you, Larry, is it concerns President Biden's son Hunter and now his brother James. There were accusations about impropriety about Hunter Biden back during the 2020 election, but they kind of went away. The media kind of poo-pooed them. But now the Justice Department appears to be pursuing some pretty serious investigations. Should the White House step up and tell what they know about this and take whatever actions are necessary?
I'd bet anything that President Biden's had enough sense from the beginning to say the Justice Department, I don't want any reports on anything you're investigating about members of my family. I want to be removed from it. I think every modern president, they say that. I think every modern president's had this same problem. Family members in trouble.
But Steve, when this issues come up at the White House and come up to the president, he gets very angry and defensive about this. I mean, he doesn't use good body language or good language at all when he talks about this.
Well, and as you see more and more that the media is acknowledging, okay, yeah, the laptop was real, it was real all along, and there is very bad stuff on there that implicates the president. The problem is he gets angry having claimed that his son is the smartest guy he knows. I think that judgment by the president ought to be questioned.
Larry, there's a lot of talk about both major political parties being divided. It used to be the Republican Party seemed to be among the most united. They always seem to be on the same talking points. But now you've got Donald Trump leading one section of that party and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell leading the other section. Who's going to dominate when they come up? Because they all have their own candidates in these primaries coming up. Who's going to win in the primaries?
Well, I'll speak to the Republicans. Clearly, Trump's going to dominate now. Will everybody he endorses win? I'm sure that's not the case. It never is for anybody. But getting his endorsement in a Republican primary, what puts you in first place at the beginning, which means it's easier to raise money, it's easier to get new support, and therefore a lot of the Trump-endorsed candidates will win. Both parties evolve and grow the same way. The more they win, the longer they're in power, the more divided they get. Because now, all of a sudden, if I'm in the majority, how I vote really means something. If I'm in the minority, how I vote's important to me and my supporters, but that's about it.
Steve, in these elections coming up, whether it's talking about the House, but particularly in the Senate, who's going to control the Senate? It's not going to come down to how the 100 seats or the 50 seats that are up. It's going to come down to just a handful of seats, how they go. If the Republicans have fights in their own primary, are they going to come out with either a candidate they really wish it's more difficult to get elected in November, or are they going to be divided among themselves and maybe not united enough to even put a good effort out, which they might if they had a different candidate?
I think it's always a challenge when you have bitter primaries. And I'm not sure what Republican Party you're talking about that's always been unified. There's always been the gap between conservatives and Republicans.
Well, you don't fight like Democrats do, I'll put it that way.
But I think that what's interesting in this cycle is that the Trump endorsement, Trump is a power into himself, but it doesn't necessarily translate. He's endorsed candidates in the past that failed poorly. In Alabama, just south of us, he endorsed Mo Brooks. He's now withdrawn his endorsement of Mo Brooks for the Senate seat there, and Mo Brooks was trailing badly. And again, you look in other states where the Trump endorsed candidate is not faring well, it's because people say, oh, I like President Trump, I like his policies. Even if I don't like President Trump, I may like his policies, but it doesn't translate as well to endorsements.
Larry, there doesn't seem to be any doubt that the party in power usually loses seats in both the House and the Senate in midterm elections. Is that going to happen this time? Is it going to be a tsunami, or is it just going to be a trickle?
It's going to be more than a ripple, not a tsunami. It's going to happen, but it's not going to be any kind of landslide for the Republicans. We Democrats are going to have some problems for the historical reasons you're pointing out, and because
and the fact the president's down in 40% range for his popularity.
That's what the next thing I was going to say.
I'm going with tsunami.
But for both of you, is Donald Trump the biggest obstacle for the Republicans winning big? Is he the one thing that might cause them not to have his big victories in November, as they're perhaps anticipating?
I think he's creating a lot of energy. I think the biggest obstacle for the Democrats is actually every time everybody drives down the street right now, they see gas prices on every placard. They might not be able to tell you exactly what bread cost or milk cost, but everybody knows moment by moment, because the prices change, what gasoline cost, and that hits people in the pocketbook. That issue, more than any other, I think is going to dominate the elections moving forward.
And Larry, you've seen this particular administration and to some extent on the Trump administration during the pandemic, they spent more and more money on giving out the various programs and things to people to keep them going. But did we overspend? Is that what's driving this inflation? And is that one of the things we didn't anticipate, whether it was under Donald Trump or under Joe Biden, that they didn't see that this inflation it might cause is going to be so pervasive and so long-lasting?
I think that's correct. Add to that the worldwide supply chain catastrophe backlog. That's a huge inflationary factor. And even if we do everything right to resolve the supply chain problem, it's going to take, what, a year and a half to get back to where we ought to be. So, yeah, huge inflationary pressures going on.
Democratic analyst Larry Woods is our guest, along with Steve Gill, Republican analyst. We're talking about the issues been dominating in Washington. We'll turn to Tennessee in this final section of the show. Back to continue our conversation on the other side of this break.